Okay, we are live. Going to let it breathe just for a moment here while we bring on our Facebook community. And then we will get things cooking. Can't wait. Can't wait. What's up? We see the Car Wash channel checking in already on YouTube. Really cool. Welcome in, everybody. This is the Frozen Rope Podcast. I'm your host, Chad Jensen. With me is the deputy editor of the Frozen Rope, Patrick Byrnes. And Pat, we have kind of a little bit of a sketchy situation. Of course, the Jazz are playing the Grizzlies tonight. We'll get into that here in a minute. But before we talk about tonight's game, the Jazz getting out to a sluggish kind of 1-3 start. Fans are starting to show a little bit of concern. There's some misgivings, some anxiety in the pit of the stomach. What have you seen that explains why the Jazz have kind of failed to launch early on? And what can this team do to quickly change it before it gets too late?
Yeah, and first, it's not that they're 1-3 that I'm so concerned about because they were underdogs in all four games. So I was expecting them. If they were 2-2, that would have been awesome. 1-3 is kind of what I was expecting. I think I wrote a week or two ago that if the Jazz won 2 out of their first 5 games, that would be a win. But the alarming thing is for sure, like they're getting blown out. They did play the Nuggets competitive, but they got blown out against the Kings. And then, they got blown out. Who else blew them out? I can't remember. It was the Kings and, another team blew them out.
It was the Suns.
Yeah, the Suns. Yeah, the Suns blew them out. And they didn't even have Booker and they didn't have Booker or their other guy, Beal, for that game. So they got blown up by backups. So that's the part that is alarming. It was a little refreshing that they did, they lost to Denver. They were supposed to lose that game. They were competitive in that game. But the thing that I worry about, number one thing that I worry about, and I was worried about this going into the season, is John Collins and Walker Kessler playing together. And John Collins, that 3-point percentage has regressed for the last 3 or 4 years. He shot 29% last year. Through 4 games. In 4 games, it's a small sample size, so there's plenty of time to boost that percentage up, but he's shooting 28% from threes this year.
Right.
And that's a big problem as far as spacing issues because you got Collins and Kessler starting. And, those guys can't coexist on the floor together if Collins is shooting 28%. It's going to be like a situation, I don't know if you remember when, Quinn Snyder had that situation where Derek Favors and Rudy Gobert were starting at the same time.
Right.
And it just didn't work, And I think Hardy recognizes it because he does sub Kessler out pretty quick to get that, to get someone else in there. But it's a problem. They're paying Collins a lot of money and they're going to eventually pay Kessler a lot of money. That's a big problem. And the other thing, it's only 4 games into this. And the Jazz have played some good teams. So that might, take that in consideration, but they're dead last in defensive rating through 4 games. And, the whole idea of, getting, length, they've got a lot of length on the court, especially to start the game. You got Horton Tucker, you got Kessler, you got Markkanen, you got Collins. That's a lot of length to be ranked last in defensive rating. If they don't at least get to the middle of the pack, they're not going to make the playoffs.
So the question is, how do they get there, right? Like, we've lamented the basically lack of defensive presence whatsoever in the 2 guards the Jazz have chosen to start up to this point. As you mentioned, there's some chemistry issues going on up front. We'll see how that kind of shakes out. Lauri Markkanen, solid defender, but let's face it, playing physical, that's not his bag. That's not his calling card per se. So if you are Will Hardy, I mean, we can talk about, coaching emphasis, technique. We can get into scheme and all that. And I think there is at least some argument to be made for this zone that the Jazz, Hardy's been leaning on early. But if you're Will Hardy and it's like, hey, we got to put a damper on this quick. We got to start stopping people a little bit so that we're not always having to play catch up and we're not down double digits to open the second quarter. What's the change? What do you do?
I don't know. I mean, he's doing the best he can. He's juggling different lineups. I think he did say that, he's going to take about 20 games before he gets a firm grip on, the best rotations moving forward. But, these guys are playing for contracts and these guys are, especially the guards, Horton Tucker, Dunn, They're playing for their lives. They're playing for their livelihood, and you got to make defense a priority. If you're not playing defense, if you're not, helping with that defensive rating, or you're a liability on defense, there's plenty of players that can step in and do that, or not necessarily do that, but can step in and get the playing time. So I think it should cost them minutes, so it's a big issue. And I know that, like, the whole Danny Ainge philosophy is length, positional length, and they've got that. I mean, they're long to start the game, but that lineup just isn't working defensively, and it's not working offensively. And you could just tell in the beginning, everything just seems out of whack. And I know everybody's talking about, I guess the main thing people are talking about is the point guard situation once Keontae George is going to take over.
Mm-hmm.
That problem is going to fix itself over time. It'll fix itself on Will Hardy's watch, which is fine. But the Kessler and Collins in the defense, those are something you just don't fix by just inserting one player in. Those things have to work themselves out, and it could be a big problem moving forward.
This is interesting. I just want to cover this real quick. We'll get to some Grizzlies talk, the game tips tonight. But if we're looking at kind of the evidence and somewhere we can sink our teeth, we look at the minutes played so far through 4 games. And you look at the guard position, leading the way, of course, you would expect this, is Jordan Clarkson, averaging exactly 30 minutes per game. He's followed by, fellow starter Taylor Horton-Tucker, who's averaging 23.5. Then it gets kind of interesting. Colin Sexton is next, averaging 19.8, followed by Keontae George, 19.5. And then you skip over number 8. That's Kelly Olynyk. He's not a guard. We know that. And you get to the 9th most minutes on the team so far in the rotation, and that's Chris Dunn, averaging 15.3 minutes. And then Ochai at 10, 13.3. So if I am Will Hardy, one thing I'm going to do to try and mitigate some of this defensive softness, because that's really what it is. I mean, you hate calling a professional team, regardless of the sport, soft, but it's very much, outside of Walker Kessler trying to do his thing in the paint, it's soft defense. To mitigate that, Pat, what I'm going to try and do is strategically get Chris Dunn and Ochai Agbaji on the court sooner rather than later. So, like, hey, you got to have your starting duo. Okay, whatever. I think you and I are still both in agreement that to open the season, you probably should have ran with Chris Dunn, Jordan Clarkson, but they're going a different direction. Fine. And it's only a matter of time, as you mentioned, before Keontae ends up at the 1 and starting and all that. That's going to take care of itself. But for the defensive woes, I'm figuring out how to balance getting Dunn and Ochai on the court a few more minutes anyway, and maybe a little bit sooner in the game, like pulling those guys out. Hey, go ahead and start for a minute, get your blood up, get into kind of a groove or whatever. But I'm not being as hesitant to get those guys on the court. And I'm certainly, I hate to say it, but like Colin Sexton, unfortunately, ends up as kind of the odd man out in that sense. Not to say he won't ever get minutes in a game, but like he doesn't play defense like those two.
No, I agree. And, Colin Sexton, it's not because of a lack of effort. It's just, he just doesn't have the size to match up with the other players. But you're right. Like Agbaji and Dunn, they're not getting as many minutes. Dunn, his numbers might be a little bit off because he only played 8 minutes last game. So he was averaging 20, but he was kind of the odd man out.
Yeah.
Against the Nuggets. So you wonder if that's a trend, or if Hardy's just going with certain players, or
maybe he wasn't feeling well, but just wasn't mentioned on the injury report. I don't know. It's definitely conspicuous.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. Like, I think the best starting 5 moving forward, if you're not going to throw Keontae George in there, is to have Dunn, start at the 1 and have Agbaji start at the 2. And that gives you length, it gives you defense. I guarantee they're not going to be last in the league in defensive rating if those guys get more minutes. But at some point, I think Hardy's has got to like give the keys to a couple guards and just have someone. It's almost like with those minutes when you read them off, he's playing 20, he's playing 20, he's playing 20. It's really hard to get in a groove if you're only playing 20 minutes a game. So I think maybe he needs to like cut someone out, and that that person's not going to like it. But I think the people that he goes with, the main people that he goes with in the rotation, the guards, he's got to give them 30 minutes, whether it's Dunn, Abaji, no matter who it is.
Clarkson's getting it. Clarkson's always going to get it, dude. Like,
Clarkson is,
one thing that's changed for sure since Will Hardy came is Jordan Clarkson going to play, and he going to play a lot. Yep. So that's a given. Like, we can wish this guy should maybe Clarkson come off the bench like the old till the cows come home, dude. But that is not happening, especially with what we know of his relationship with ownership. So, like, if there's something that could change, Pat, and it's plausible that it could possibly, it's maybe just, I don't know. You're right on that. Making sure the guard tandem is getting enough bites at the apple to build some chemistry, and that speaks to offensively too. It hasn't exactly been perfect on that side of the court either, but it's a little bit of a pickle. And I think one of the things that really just has to happen here is schematically, Hardy's got to get his what together, and he's got to challenge these dudes from a pride perspective to start playing a full game from an intensity and an effort level on that side of the court when we talk about defense.
Yeah, there's no question. And the defense, I mean, it's a problem. Like, it's a big time problem, and they've got to get it fixed. And the thing is, there's no excuse. Like, they've got the horses to put on the court where they should be able to put up enough resistance where, it's not that much of an issue. But
right.
And they have a lot of players. You take Sexton, you take Clarkson, you take Horton Tucker. I mean, I know they score in different ways. They're different in a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, they're the same player.
Yeah.
They're players that when they drive to the rim, they're facilitating. It really isn't on their mind. They have a one-track mind. They're looking to score the ball. Yeah, if something opens up where someone's wide open, they can get an assist. They can facilitate. I mean, they're NBA players. Of course they can.
It's kind of like Chad Jensen on prom night. One-track mind.
That's right. So, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, they got a one-track mind as far as scoring, and they're when Keontae George breaks down a defense, let's say he breaks down a defense, he can make that decision a split second sooner to get someone the ball, not if they're like wide open, like just if they've got that little sliver where it's open. Keontae George has the ability where you can get them the ball. I remember one time, I can't remember who it was, but he broke down a defense and he got the ball to Markkanen, to where Markkanen got fouled. And after watching that play, I was thinking, man, Horton Tucker, Clarkson, or Sexton could not have made that play.
No, it's just not on their minds. And I agree with you. I've noticed quite a few moments for Keontae as a facilitator. I mean, for what it's worth, he's as I mentioned earlier, he's averaging just under 20 minutes, per game. On the assist side of things, he is averaging exactly where'd he go? There we go. 3 assists a game. Now, if we were to say who's leading this team in assists, currently it's Talen Horton Tucker. He's averaging 5.3 assists per game, which is followed by Jordan Clarkson. The two guards, it's, of course, this obviously makes sense, getting the most minutes. Behind him, it's Kelly Olynyk, right? He's just a great glue guy. He'll score if he must. He's not afraid to take matters into his own hands, but he's also always just looking for the opportunity, whether it's him shooting it or somebody else. Then you get to Keontae at number 4. So from a minutes to assist ratio, Keontae's probably higher than anybody currently on the well, maybe besides Olynyk, to be honest with you, but we just need to see more of that. Now, Pat, let's shift gears real quick here. Tonight, you got a tough opponent. What do you see shaking out, and maybe a key to the Jazz winning this thing?
Well, the Jazz, this is the first, game that they're favored in. So Memphis, like when you think Memphis Grizzlies, you think it's going to be a tough game. They're missing Morant, they're missing Steven Adams, they're missing, Derrick Rose, they're missing some backups. So this is not a team that's at full strength. I mean, the odds makers have it pegged as a close game, but the Jazz should win this game. This is the first game of the year where the Jazz are going into it as a favorite. As far as, winning the game, I think a lot of it's just what we talked about. They've got to, I'm really curious what the score is going to be after the first quarter. They've been down double digits at some point in the first quarter in 3 out of the 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to break that trend, and they just need to play defense, and they need to take advantage of a team that is depleted. I mean, you're talking about an 0-4 team, and they really haven't been that competitive. They've had one close game out of 4 games. So the Jazz, they need to play defense. I'd love to see Collins, like step up and have a big game, but those are the 2 main things I'm looking for. First quarter score, Collins shooting threes. I'm looking to see what Keontae does to more solidify that he should be the point guard of the future. And I want to see them, if they can defend against a team that's really not, an offensive juggernaut. You can make an excuse, well, they're last in defensive rating because they played 4 really good teams. Well, this isn't a good team, so offensively, especially without their horses. So we'll see what happens.
Hey, a team worth its salt. A team that we were hoping going into this season was going to be competitively relevant when it comes time to the playoffs and the play-in and all that, handles a game like this. This is a game you're supposed to win when your opponent is that depleted. You don't take it for granted. You don't look past them. You don't, as Eazy-E would say, get caught slipping, Pat. But you take care of business and you get out there and you handle it. So we'll see how it shakes out. Car Wash, thank you for commenting. That's why we do this live. We want to hear your thoughts, your questions, your topics. Car Wash says the key to win is play D, block shots, and make 3-pointers. Aptly said. We'll see how it shakes out. Do you have a prediction before we say good night, Pat?
I got I'll say Jazz by 10. I think the Jazz are going to come out. They're 1-3. It's a game they should win. They got the home cooking. They look really good at home in their last win against the Clippers. So let's see if they can ride that momentum, that home momentum, and get a win.
Yeah, I don't know about a score, but I'm definitely picking the Jazz tonight. And I'm knocking on wood as I'm saying this. If they don't handle this one, then I'm going to actually start being a little bit worried about this team. So it's still early. Like I said, you mentioned this earlier. Will Hardy saying, I don't know that I'm really going to have a beat on things till 20 games in. Well, that's like a quarter of your season, right? So if you are putting that, just for an example, in NFL terms, that's like an NFL coach going into a season, Pat, and saying, I'm not sure if I'm going to have, really know what's going on till week 5. Wait, what? You're paid to kind of know things a little bit sooner than that. That's why you have a training camp. That's why we do a preseason. And I know it's different. It's not exactly apples to apples comparison, but I digress a little bit. It's going to be a fun game. I'm expecting a Jazz win as well, Pat. And I want to see Keontae continue to shine. Let's go. Let's go ahead and take control of that one position sooner than later, rookie.
Yeah, and I agree. Like a Keontae George, the better he looks, the faster he can take over that job. And just to kind of piggyback off your point, as far as the 20 games, you wonder if maybe Hardy, Hardy's a smart guy. He's smart. He's a smart guy. He knows what combinations work. You wonder how much the politics of who plays and who doesn't play based on seniority, contract, stuff like that comes into play. Compared to who are actually the best rotations moving forward.
We saw that last year, dude. After the All-Star break, we saw the upstairs, the old saying that crap rolls downhill. Will Hardy was, okay, you want us to play this guy, sit this guy, okay. But he still had those guys battling every night. No matter who the front office was telling him to play, at least they were battling and coming out swinging. It didn't work out too well for him in the final analysis, but at least there was that.
True. But yeah, I will see what happens. It's going to be an interesting game, but I can't wait. It should be fun.
Guys, we'll see you back here next week, Tuesdays. We went live today, Wednesday, because the holiday, nobody wants to listen to a podcast when they're out there trick-or-treating with the kiddos on Halloween. So we decided to do it today, and it just so happened to work out that, hey, it's a game day. So we'll be back in the saddle, though, next week, Tuesday, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Can't wait to see you then. In the meantime, connect with us on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. You can find Pat on Twitter at PBurnsNBA, myself at Chad and Jensen, and keep it locked in with InsideTheJazz.com, the frozen rope, because we're going to be breaking it all down from A to Z. You know this between now and then. So, Pat, have a good one, brother. Can't wait to talk next week. For Pat, I'm Chad. We'll talk to you then.